changed him, because he changed my life. He did. And I watched him change the lives of so many other people. I saw it before my eyes. I saw him take their situations, and I saw him make them feel better. And I saw him put them on paths. He put me on a path that brought me here tonight, and I'm so grateful. There's so many things I can say about Scott Enos. He's just such an incredible guy. He's done so much for the people that he knows. Everyone should get to know him, and it's a gift to know him. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first inductee of the night, Scott Weber.
Well, thank you, Cody. That was probably way too nice, but no, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and certainly for the Champions of Change. Remarkable idea and a great thing to be associated with, for sure. Also, I want to thank the leadership of the event this evening as well. Lots of people coming together to do the right thing. When Cody asked me to do something about this, I was asking him, well, what specifically are we, what is it that you want me to talk about? Because it's always hard to, kind of talk about yourself, and it's not anything that I normally do. I'm a teacher, and that's cool, and we do talk to people, but it's not really public speaking. Does that make sense? We kind of know what we're getting into, and we have a curriculum and things of that nature. But he said, why don't you talk about some of the things that we've done? And Cody and I have gotten to know each other quite a bit, so I said, that's cool. But I wanted to start this by simply saying the word opportunity. Because that's a key phrase that we have to think about it every time we're talking about champions of change or anything else. Merriam-Webster actually states it this way, plain and simple. It's a good chance for advancement or progress. That's it. Opportunity. Progress and a chance, that's all. So I needed to explain a little bit about my background. So my mom was also a teacher, but she found the classroom way too confining. And when I was 10 years old, she actually went to work at a work center for developmental and cognitively delayed adults. This was back in the 1970s. I was 10 years old. And by the way, it was the greatest job I ever had. That's hard to say when you're now 50 and you're going, my best job was 10. You kind of go, well, that's almost backward. But I've had some great jobs in between and met some wonderful people. But what I started to understand when I got to go down there, and it was because there was no daycare back in those days, it was in the 70s and the 80s, we didn't have daycare. Your summer events were you go to work with mom, and it was super cool, and I got to get to know these individuals, and they were awesome. And after spending several years down there, it was my first full-time job out of high school. So I was there for quite a while, and I got to know these folks, and I got to understand these folks, and I got to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and I got to understand what they wanted. And it was opportunity. Simply put, that doesn't change. That doesn't change how we look at life today, and it doesn't change anybody in this room or anybody that we might be able to help down the road. It's about opportunity. I talk to some kids at times, and it gets very frustrating because there's challenges and there's barriers. And I keep saying to them, look, our whole goal here is to use a sports euphemism, is to get you onto the field. We're not talking about Hall of Fame. We're not talking about the star of the team. We're talking about getting you on the field. Opportunity, a chance. Because the chance leads into other things. Chances lead into other things that can be spectacular. But if you don't get your foot on the football field, you ain't ever going to make a play. And so we talk about this all the time. We talk about, well, what is it that you want to do? What's your strength right now? Let's build on this strength, because you know your strengths. And if you need a little help, let's work together. We can start working this out. We can start figuring it out. So kind of back to my story. As I started to realize, even as a real young kid, that there was just this opportunity or a chance to get to know folks, a chance to try to figure out their lives, and maybe just to make it a little bit better or easier. And as I started getting older and getting a little more education and got opportunities to work into other fields, I went into, let's just say, not so much social work or social field, and got into maybe some more traditional jobs, more orthodox types of work, and loved it. I mean, it was great. I was in sales for a long time and really enjoyed it. but there was something missing. And it was often that when you go, well, what was the times in your life that you enjoyed it? It was helping people, working with people, finding opportunity. And I'd always get tossed back into social services, back into other things, and I found that it kept calling me back. I got a little more education, and I got into special education about 15 years ago. And I kind of think I found my niche, right? It was always wanting to help, but it was really the high school kids, because you start to understand that the high school kids are smart. I mean, they understand themselves, and they are really smart people. They've learned a lot about themselves, but they don't know the next step. And you're going, well, wait a minute, we can talk about this. We can help you. We can get you into these opportunities. We can get you into a chance to see where you can really shine. And all of a sudden, when they get that breath of fresh air, that freedom from school, the mandatory school, and they go out and take those opportunities, and they start to realize, I'm pretty good at this stuff. And they come back and they start telling you, you want to talk about exciting, you want to talk about being able to get to work every day. I get to go to work every day. It's not have to. Get to go to work every day. Sure, some days are better than others. There's a lot of really good days, and it's a lot of fun. So kind of going back to what I was talking with Cody about, he says, well, were there any times specifically that you can remember that maybe it made an impact on community? And I said, well, there was a few times in my life that might have had more impactful opportunities than others. And the first one that I could recall, I worked for an industry. It's the largest employer of people with disabilities in the country. It was called Pride Industries. They're based out of Roseville, California. I worked for it for about 5 years. It was a big company back then, but when we got started, we started doing some federal government jobs. And literally, my kids were very young at the time. They were growing like crazy, and I found myself on the East Coast, and we were in California. I found myself on the East Coast a lot, but what was happening was these federal government jobs were opening up for people with disabilities, and the walls were coming down, the barriers were breaking down, and I needed to be a part of it. I had to be part of this thing, and luckily my wife and kids gave me that opportunity to start helping people. But it started to become huge, and what we started realizing is at one point, the company that I was working with was already 5,000 people big, and within 2 years we grew to 10,000 people. It was amazing. And here again, these weren't bad jobs, they were actually really good jobs, and we were starting to meet people that were in all sorts of precarious spots. One of the most impressive things that I ever heard in my life was this young man back in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He'd been working for us for about 1.5 years, and he was brilliant. He had a disability that people could see, and it stopped him from getting opportunity. People would look at it and go, oh yeah, you're really great. We see your resume, we see your references. We see all these cool things you've done, but you're blind. How do we work with this? How do we do this? Well, our company did that. That's what we do. We hire people with disabilities. Within 1.5 years, he started out as a shelf stocker at a commissary at one of the Virginia Beach things. Within 1.5 years, it was obvious when we brought him on, that was not a position for him, but it was the position that we had. And this guy took this thing by the horns and took off. Within 6 months, he was already a lead. Within the first year, he'd already become supervisor. Within the 1.5 years, he became the assistant manager.